We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.
So you think that you can tell us how to live our lives, never questioning the source from which your moral code derives. You think that suffering is part of some great plan that's been devised. I wonder what will it take for you to start opening your eyes? I wonder.
Oh, hi. Welcome. I was taking notes. How's everybody doing? Welcome to the Atheist Experience. It's August 29th, 2021. If you're watching us live, I'm Matt Dillahunty. And after a long absence, welcome back, Shannon Q.
Hey, I'm back. I'm so excited. I'm very, 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 very excited to be back. Hopefully, I'm still on my A game. I mean, now's your chance, guys, because I've had a hiatus. I'm probably rusty. Today's the day you can probably get me. So
I'm also,
Bring it.
first of all, there's like 900 people plus watching at this particular moment. And I fully expect that to be multiplied 4 or 5 times over just because people heard you were here.
oh wow, everybody makes choices, and some of them are mistakes. That's fine.
That's good stuff. Hey, I have one kind of quick announcement before we start getting into calls, and that's to try to do my best to explain something, because there's been a lot of discussion about calls and delays and doing things over the internet, and what adds to frustration, and when somebody's interrupting or when they're not, or when somebody's talking over somebody when they're not. Once upon a time, the host and co-host for the Atheist Experience would be sitting right next to each other in the same room in a studio here in Austin, and the callers would come in through a telephone system or a voice over IP system. And so we would hear the calls at exactly the same time, and all of this interaction would take place. And then it was all shipped out to you over the magic of the internet. That's not the way things work anymore. And it's high time that everybody, including callers and the host and co-hosts, do a better job at recognizing this. Because what happens is my audio leaves my house and goes to a rendezvous machine. Shannon's audio leaves her house and goes through a rendezvous machine. The caller's audio leaves their cell phone, which is shitty at full duplex anyway, and comes in through some sort of voice over device into that machine as well. And then basically everything but me gets sent back to me so I can hear what's going on, and everything but Shannon gets back to Shannon, et cetera. It's a big mess. For those of you who might be old school gamers and familiar with it, it's the difference between a LAN party and the very early let's play Doom on the internet, where you were either a low ping bastard that won every game or you were not. You were basically just screwed. So the short version of all this is we are going to be making a little more judicious use of the hold button. And I am going to be, despite my normal habit of let me interrupt at the first instant where something goes wrong, and there are good reasons for that, whether you think so or not. I'm going to try to let people get a little further in their thing, as long as they're actually answering the questions and having a conversation with us. If they're not, well, I'm going to let Shannon devour them.
I am still going to be obnoxious, as I always am.
Yes.
There's no restraining me from how obnoxious I am.
You be you, and that's the way it goes. Welcome to first caller. Jeroen in the Caribbean wants to talk about another atheist that said they didn't go through a proper grieving process. So welcome. You're on with Shannon Q and Matt. How are you?
Hello, Matt. Hello, Shannon. First, for the sake of clarity, can we pretend to be on the radio and say over so that we don't speak over each other? Over?
No, I hate that, but let's try to do our best without making it feel like we're in a 50s war movie.
Over.
Okay, very well. I'll do my best. First, let me recapitulate for Shannon. This is a follow-up to a conversation with Matt and I believe Don in October or November of 2019. To make a long story short, I deconverted a person without expecting to, and I was caught off guard by the emotional fallout. Now, later on, I learned that part of that emotional fallout was due to the fact that she had lost a loved one in a very tragic manner, and that until her loss of faith, she had coped with her grief by telling herself that she would see her loved one again in heaven. So when her faith was lost, the grieving process was undone. And I had a very interesting conversation with another atheist about it, and he argued that believers, therefore, do not truly have a grieving process. They don't truly cope with their grief. It's based on a false foundation. But I think that goes a little too far. I wanted to know what you guys think.
Okay, that's interesting to me. And I can see the point, because saying that it's based on a false foundation, depending on your perspective, and everybody's different, could very much be valid, because you're essentially saying that I haven't lost this person. I've basically just kind of misplaced them for a little while. I will be reunited with this person. So that's a way to quell grief by pushing it aside. So you sound like you have a different perspective, and you feel as, because to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this from your perspective, to me, grieving something is knowing that it's gone forever, and knowing that you're going to have to deal with the fact that that is lost, that person is lost, that thing is lost, that relationship is lost, and that it's something that you cannot get back. It is no longer accessible to you. So if you believe that at some point in time in the future, it is still going to be accessible to you, then grief isn't necessarily the same, which is, I think, that the point that person was making. You could quell it or you could push it aside. Do you have a different perspective or a different definition of grief?
Well, the analogy I used was basically that a house built on a shaky foundation is still a house. It can collapse, but while it stands, it stands. So, while
I don't understand how that analogy tracks, though. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I interrupted you on purpose just because I don't understand how that analogy tracks.
Yeah, so maybe my analogy is flawed. While they believe, they're fine with it. And if they die believing, then they die being fine with it. But
you're talking about the difference between a treatment that is designed to alleviate the symptoms and cause versus a bandage. So yes, you're right that a house built on sand is still a house, but it's going to crumble. It was a useless house. It was not a stable house, which is what we're looking for. And so the grieving process is one where there are steps that people go through so that they don't have to sit here and be miserable forever. They can move forward with their life, sort of thing. And if you build your grieving process on a fictional scenario, when that's yanked out from underneath you, you can basically be stuck starting all over.
Okay, I understand. I guess I see the point. And basically, we snowballed into a different conversation. He also asserted that because of this, the God aspect in, like, for example, Alcoholics Anonymous was also a flaw.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. Because if you...
That's the reason I have massive objections to 12-step programs, particularly like Alcoholics Anonymous, because they start with, I'm helpless to do anything. I must find a higher power. And that what it does is it takes, in my opinion, and I'm not an expert, it takes one dependency and replaces it on a dependency with the group, the method, the thing like that. And if you get to a point where the thing that you've surrendered to as your higher power, you find out doesn't exist, then your foundation for sobriety may be at risk. And that's why I prefer other methods. But Shannon knows way more about it than I do.
Yeah, so from a psychological standpoint, if you're tethering your mental state to something that isn't ultimately sustainable or and indefinitely sustainable, that to my mind is a huge mistake. So from the Alcoholics Anonymous perspective and tying it back to the grieving perspective, if you're tethering your ability to quell your grief or deal with your addiction to a belief in a deity, and something happens that unravels that belief system for you, then what happens to your mental health that you had tethered, like, or to the components of your mental health that you had tethered to that in order to, perceive yourself as being okay? You're no longer going to be able to be okay because it was that house, like Matt said, that was built on a poor foundation is now collapsing, right? So I would completely agree with that. It seems as though it's more so a temporary placation that works in multiple scenarios because it's also built into an intrinsic societal support system and gives you temporary emotional satiation, as opposed to giving you permanent abilities to deal with the emotional states yourself. You're kind of like outsourcing your emotions, which isn't a healthy way to deal with any sort of emotional conflict or addiction or grief.
I'm curious
if that's your one pillar that you're tied to. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I'm curious though, Jeroen. So you were talking with another atheist who talked about how they didn't feel that they'd grieved properly because it was based in belief that now no longer exists. And I'm assuming that they went on to perhaps find another way to grieve. What was your point of disagreement with them?
Interesting.
Because at the end of the day, setting aside everything, hang on, at the end of the day, setting aside everything we know about psychology and other stuff, all that really happened is somebody told you that they didn't think and they didn't feel that they had a good foundation for their grief because of belief, and now they're working on a better one. So what's the objection?
Oh no, I didn't actually. I knew better than to disagree with the person, with the person, because this is the person that I converted by accident, and there was a lot of anger there. She saw it as a waste of time. That she wasted a lot of time grieving improperly. But I said, that's interesting. I didn't actually argue with her. I mean, I have Asperger's, but through the school of hard knocks, I learned that I, at times just need to shut up. No, the disagreement was when I discussed it with another atheist, and they said, well, yeah, I can understand the anger. And then this third atheist, made the allusion to Alcoholics Anonymous and how that was also not a proper way. And I guess you guys explained it very well, better than he did. I think I get it now. So thank you, and I will let you guys go to the other callers.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeroen. Appreciate
the fruitful conversation.
Bye-bye.
So yeah, there we go. First call. You feeling okay, Shannon? Do we need to slow down for you? Are you, because you feel like you're going full speed and I don't want to stop you.
No, I'm good. I don't understand what's happening.
I'm just messing with you because you're like, I'm not sure if I got my A game. And then you come in and you completely fucking own a call, which is awesome.
Okay. No, I'm kidding.
So,
apparently I am slow. See, look.
You're only slow with me. With the callers, you're doing phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so one of the things that we've done is we wanted to get into calls sooner and try to make sure that we're doing what we can to make the show as productive as possible. But that means that we still have to do announcements. And as you know, we've got lots and lots of ways for you to contribute and participate, not the least of which in chat live alongside the show. And now, by the way, we've almost tripled the number of people watching just since they heard Shannon Q was on. It's amazing. And we really appreciate everybody who's active in chat. But you can also donate. There's a donate link if you're watching us live. It's directly below the chat box. 100% of your donations go directly to the ACA. They don't pass Go or Google and YouTube. Don't collect $200 or whatever it is. And it's very appreciated. You can also order your Atheist Experience Network merchandise. The website for that is going to be up on the screen right now. It's tiny.cc/merchaca. Please note that's a different tiny URL than we used to use. It's been changed for a month or so or two, maybe. I don't know. I just like making sure that correction's there. You can also become a member on the YouTube channel as well, and that will get you custom icons. And most importantly, it will get you out of slow mode. And I can pretty much guarantee that slow mode is going to be on quite frequently because our chat gets spicy, let's say. And I love it. You can also support the Atheist Community of Austin, the Atheist Experience in particular, at patreon.com/the Atheist Experience. And there are a couple of Facebook pages that we like to put out for people. These are the Atheist Experience public or the Atheist Experience fan group and the Atheist Experience private fan group. They're both on Facebook, AXPFG and AXPPFG, where you can find a lot of information. There's also the unofficial ACA Discord, the fan-run Discord. You can find a lot of people there willing to have conversations about many different subjects. And so if you didn't get through on the phone today, if you don't want to get through on the phone today, maybe you're you're nervous, you don't like this sort of a call, or you have a question that you don't think is necessarily suited to the show, but you're out there alone somewhere and you want to interact, not only do we recommend, recovering from religion and finding or creating your own groups locally, because as social creatures, we need that sort of interaction. But in the interim, you can check out the Discord and various other sources to see if there's people there who can offer you some assistance. We have... I'm
ready. My body is ready. Let's do it.
Your body is ready. Stephen in Washington is a theist who's calling about Christian nationalists and the line between political and religious issues. So welcome to the show, Stephen. How can we help?
Hey, I just wanted to talk to you guys about some of the local groups that we've had at our church down here. Kind of pushing a political message that a lot of the parishioners here don't necessarily agree with. And we're not really a political church at all, but a lot of these groups, one in particular, FRC, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, have been talking to a lot of us and putting a lot of pamphlets out. And we're Episcopalian. We're a very liberal church. And it's just kind of concerning to me and a lot of the other parishioners here that churches are being, mobilized in this kind of way. Is that making sense?
Yeah, I'm curious, Stephen. The pamphlets and the positions that they're advocating, are they endorsing candidates, or are they just advocating for positions?
So the way that they word it is kind of interesting. They will line out a particular policy or talk about a certain bill, and then state what position would be in the best adherence with biblical text. And then it'll inform you on who the candidates are that support that view on that particular issue.
It's that last step. It's the last step that may, in fact, be a problem, but it might also not be. Because, so first of all, for example, the Atheist Community of Austin is a nonprofit 501c3, and we cannot take positions on, it cannot endorse political candidates and things like that. We can tell you what, as an organization, our view, if such a thing exists, is on a particular issue. And so as such, the ACA has some position statements. The ACA has also, in the past, done a voter's guide. We felt the need to make sure that we were doing our best to inform people. But what we did was we sent out a list of questions to everyone running for office in the state of Texas, both state elections and national elections. And of those that came back, we published all of them. And so that's just to show that irrespective of whether somebody has a D or an R or an I after their name, here's where they are on various positions that you might care about. At no point did we highlight the ones we agreed with. It was up to the individual to say, hey, what are my positions? And if they cared about what the ACA's positions were, they could have gone to look those up and then to see who's consistent with those positions. If they are saying, here's what the Bible says, and because of that, you should vote for person X, they may in fact be in violation of the law. I would recommend that you and anybody else from your church that has this concern, not only talk to your church leaders about it, but you might want to contact the Freedom from Religion Foundation, because nobody enforces church-state separation more fairly than secularists, than the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and nobody's going to know more about this than the people who are constantly trying to stop this. And I greatly appreciate you, Stephen, and not just Episcopalians, but any theist that is concerned about entanglement between religion and government. As my friend Reverend Barry Lynn, who was the former president of Americans United for Church-State Separation, worked tirelessly until he retired to ensure that there wasn't undue entanglement between religion and government. And so, yeah, it may seem weird for you as a Christian to reach out to an atheist organization. And if so, I'd recommend that if you don't want to reach out to Freedom from Religion Foundation, you reach out to Americans United for Separation of Church and State, which was previously run by the Reverend Barry Lynn.
Good suggestions.
Okay. I'll definitely reach out to those groups. I'm sure I can just Google them and find some more information on them. The thing that is really concerning for me is that a lot of these churches are putting forward members of their parishes up for elections in school board positions and city council positions. And a lot of them are winning. And I'm only one guy, and a lot of the people in my parish don't have any interest in politics, but these people are advocating for like offering creationism in school and making like a mandatory county dress code for all of the public schools. And it just, I don't understand how they can do this. I feel like between the Johnson Amendment and all these different groups that none of this should be allowed to be happening, but it's all democratically run. So I don't know what to do.
I hear you. It's a fine line, and I'm not going to pretend that I know all the answers. If I had my friend Andrew Seidel here, he would probably give you the answer that most lawyers would, which is it depends. That is the most lawyerly answer. And Andrew and all of my lawyer friends will say the same thing. It depends. But if you have legitimate concerns about what's going on, I know that those organizations, both Americans United and Freedom of Religion Foundation, and perhaps even American Atheists, would be willing to offer their perspective, the legal background on it, and possibly even take up a case, because there are concerns. And I can't, you and I are going to disagree, Stephen, on whether or not there's a God, but there are other issues in this world that matter, and I'm glad that we can work together on that issue, which is irrespective of which of us is right about a God. Maybe we shouldn't be shoving it down the throats of school children. Save that for church. Let's keep science classroom science.
I just had one last thing that I wanted to shoot your way. Have you heard of these lobbying groups? I think the FRC is the one that I know of, but I was looking around online, and there's tons of them, and they
there are
millions of dollars and putting it towards programs like this. How is this not a bigger deal?
A lot of us are yelling. It kind of we think it's a big deal.
I'll tell you why. First of all, I highly recommend Andrew Seidel's book, The Foundation Myth. But I'll tell you why it's not a bigger deal. Because religious individuals make up the majority in the United States, and people who don't care about, religious intrusion into government are definitely the majority. Because once you take the people who are in favor of it and then add in the people who are apathetic towards it, you get like, what's the big deal? I mean, who cares if the money says "In God We Trust"? Who cares if kids learn about, creationism in schools? And for some of those things, I'm in agreement on the, who cares? Why is this a big deal? Why is it a big deal if it says "In God We Trust" on our money? It's just, it's clear we don't. It's a big deal because every step in the wrong direction leads us further down a path that can lead to a sort of theocracy. And so it's worthwhile to be vigilant in responding to that. And there's a lot of people who are just like, nah, that could never happen. We'll never have a Taliban run United States or even the rough equivalent of it. And to the extent that they might be right, they should be thanking the rest of us who are working constantly to make sure that doesn't happen. Because what some people have been advocating is very much like having a Taliban-like run United States.
People don't realize, I don't think, that it's an iterative process also. It seems like it's nitpicking, but it's not nitpicking. What it is pointing out that there's so many tiny instances that they accumulate into a massive cultural paradigm. And one of the reasons that there's not a lot more people screaming about it, which Matt touched on and I think said eloquently, is that if you feel as though it represents you, or that that it is your belief system, or you're apathetic towards it, then you're not as inclined to see an issue with it, because you're either aligned with it or closely enough aligned to it that if something does happen, you're not going to be directly affected by it. And that's what breeds the apathy. So good for you for being somebody who could potentially be aligned with those people who are either apathetic or engaged in making those changes so that they can get what they want and have a theocratic sort of society, even if not in name, but at least in practice, culturally, to recognize that this is an issue. And we're not just screaming about it because we're pedants who want to seem as though we're smarter because we answered a question differently, but in fact that secularism is important because it protects both the religious and the secular, and it's something that more people should be invested in. So good for you for recognizing that. And I appreciate you calling. I'm sorry that I'm way too Canadian to have much to contribute on a political level, but but I do recognize its importance.
Stephen, if you can't find the way to get in touch with those organizations, by all means, email tv@atheist-community.org and somebody will answer and get you appropriate links. But thanks a lot for calling. And by the way, call back and let us know what you found out. And, because it may be that the things you're specifically concerned about are technically legal for the time being, and we need to, do some more work.
Sure. I really appreciate the kind words, the suggestion for calling out to those individuals. It's so selfish that they, like all these churches that are supporting this have their own schooling programs. It's just a really strong disregard against any of the rest of us that want to use this or have to use this public schooling program, that they want to just spread it out to everybody. Anyway, I appreciate your time. I'll let you get on to other callers. And y'all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks
so much, Stephen. Appreciate it. On that note, there's some other stuff that we've always got to do announcement-wise. I know I told you about the Facebook groups and the Discord, and you can do all that, but there's also an atheist versus theist debates group for the people who want to get a little bit more than just let me get some answers, maybe want to get down in the metaphorical mud and have some hopefully productive discussions. I had a discussion on Friday night about the resurrection that was about an hour long, doesn't really qualify as a debate, but it was, in the same ballpark, and I thought it went really well. And not every discussion needs to be hostile or contentious or anything else. For those of you who aren't aware, not only does the Atheist Community of Austin and the Atheist Experience Network produce this, the premier, hands down, super awesome show, mostly because Shannon's on it more often than she's on other shows. And maybe you might have seen Talk Heathen earlier today, where they introduced the new co-host on Talk Heathen, Katie Montgomery. But there's another show that airs on Sundays in between those two shows, and that's the Nonprofits. Every Sunday at 3 p.m. Central, new hosts, new segments, and they are closing in on 10,000 subscribers, which will put them in a whole new category with regard to what they can do. So first of all, yes, a huge round of applause to all the people involved behind the scenes and not behind the scenes with regard to getting Nonprofits out and getting viewers and listeners out there. If you haven't checked that out, and if you aren't familiar with the other content that's produced by Atheist Experience Network, you can go to tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. That is your one-stop shop for all of the shows that we're producing: Secular Sexuality, Truth Wanted, Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, everything that you can get. Nonprofits too. I guess I'm going to keep promoting Nonprofits because they're doing so damn. It's annoying because Johnny and I are friends, and he's like, he wants Nonprofits to be the premier show of the ACA, and so I'm gonna push back. But the truth is, they're going gangbusters and doing really awesome, and we love them for it. But none of those shows would exist, and none of this content would exist, and Shannon and I would just look really silly sitting at home going, hey, am I connected? Is there something going on? Hey, is anybody listening? What's going on? If it weren't for these people, the people on the crew who are working behind the scenes to screen your calls, to work on the video issues, to work on the telephony issues, that subject I talked about at the beginning of the show, where we were saying, hey, once upon a time we sat in a studio and there was no lag, and now all of a sudden we're dealing with lag all the time. They're the ones that are dealing with all that behind the scenes, including when somebody gets connected or if they don't feel like their call was handled properly. Those people are badass. And if you don't think so, I don't know what's wrong with you. I just don't know what to say.
Deal with me.
We'll move on. We got another theist caller in Germany, Jamen, who says that atheism is irrational, so we should have the burden of proof. How do you figure?
Okay, hello. First off, thank you very much for having me on the show.
Sure.
I've been talking about this topic with some stranger on TikTok, and he really thought my arguments were interesting, he said, and he really wanted to show my arguments to the show because I didn't get real answers from anywhere else. So, as a theist, first off, I'm quite nervous right now. And
Okay. Don't worry about it.
Perfect. So
We're just people.
Maybe it is not clear to say something, but
I can help out a little bit. I can actually help out a little bit here, Yaman. Do you think that if somebody makes a claim, they should have a burden of proof?
Well, it depends because most people just assume that the theist should have the burden of proof, which I get.
That's not what I asked.
Because
that's not what I asked. I didn't ask anything about theism. I'm not talking about theism. I'm saying if someone makes a claim that something is true, should they have a burden of proof? What should our position be on any claim? Like, take any claim. If somebody says, I got $1 million in the bank, or I was abducted by aliens last night, or Jesus is real, or Jesus is not real. Anybody that makes a claim, should they have a burden of proof?
Yes.
Okay, then we're in agreement.
What I wanted to talk about is that most people, when I talk to atheists, they say, yeah, I'm the theist. I believe in God, and that is why I have the burden of proof. And if I ask them, why don't you believe in God? They say, yeah, I shouldn't have a reason. I want a reason to believe in God.
No.
I could say something different also. Like every atheist is different, but I would say something definitely different.
Yeah, me too.
Well,
I wouldn't say that. I'm sorry that you're not getting here. Let's play this out. Let's let you and Shannon. So you believe there's a God. Shannon is not convinced there's a God. Have the conversation.
Okay, so I don't think that there is a definition of God that's logically tenable that I've ever come across. So if this is where it becomes complex in these conversations. I am not a fan of burden of proof tennis. I'm just not. I think it's a little bit silly. I think it's a way to have poor conversations, really, to be honest with you, because you're essentially just saying, oh, did I freeze? Am I back?
You're back.
Oh, I froze for a sec. I'm sorry. Sometimes my computer does. I think I'm back. Let me know if I am. Okay. So I don't like burden of proof tennis, I think is where I left off before I froze, because I think it's just a way to have poor conversations. It's instead of actually getting into the meat of a dialogue about what people believe in, why should people believe things or not, you're talking about who has the burden of proof endlessly to the point of frustration and infuriation, and nobody can have a good dialogue. So if you would like to have a conversation about why you believe in God and why I don't believe in God, I'm happy to do that. But it's what burden of proof? This might be a better question. What burden of proof do you think I have when I say that there's no logically tenable definition of God?
I wanted to... I first wanted to ask you, do you deny God explicitly, or do you just not believe in it, but see the possibility?
Which God? Like give me a definition of God. Like, because God is such an ambiguous, ubiquitous concept. You would have to really give me the definition that we're working with first, which is where the problem comes in, right? Yes. I don't think there's a logically tenable definition. What's your definition? Then we'll go from there.
I'm not talking about any specific God. I'm just saying an independent being.
Well, then I win. Logically tenable definition doesn't exist.
Yeah, if you're not going to define the thing, you cannot ask someone what their position is on something and then refuse to define it.
Right.
Well,
what is your position on Fergal, Burgle, Menergal, Burgle?
Well, I just wanted to explain it. I wasn't finished. How I define God. Wasn't that question?
Wonderful. Yes,
okay, I want to clarify something though, and that is how you define God isn't. I mean, it's important to talking about what you believe, but It doesn't matter. You could define God differently from what you believe in order to ask Shannon if she believes in that God. It is about, so when we're talking about beliefs, this is about propositions. This is why I always talk about propositional logic. And so if you put forward a proposition, this particular thing exists in reality, and then you define the properties of that thing, that proposition is one that you can either accept or reject. If you reject the proposition, that is not the same as saying this proposition I have concluded is false. It just means I am either accepting this proposition, I am convinced it's true, or I am rejecting this proposition, I am not convinced it's true. And so when Shannon's asking you, which God are we talking about? Could you define the characteristics of God? That is the first step that anybody should be engaged in before they can answer the question, do you believe this? Whether it's about a God or not. It could be, do you believe that the earth orbits the sun? And what you would need to do is define earth and sun and orbit. This is true for everything. This has nothing to do with theism. So if you ask,
Yes.
hey, are you convinced that a God exists? The first question we have to ask is, which God are you talking about? Give us a definition and we can tell you whether or not we're convinced.
Right.
Yes, God, how I would, and like most theists will define it, is just creator outside of time and space, completely independent. And yeah, the rest is just from different religions, but that is just the core idea of God, that there's something outside of time and space that is all powerful. That creates the universe.
So in that case, I can answer this easily. I am not convinced that there is any such thing as a creator outside of time and space. I am not convinced that it's even possible for anything to be outside of time and space, or that outside time and space is even a cogent concept. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that I am convinced that as the default position, outside of time and space is absurd. And until you demonstrate that there is the possibility of something outside time and space, you're talking about absurdities.
Then what I would call absurdity, well, not in that way, but we can just talk about Big Bang, because we all are agreed to the Big Bang, that it existed like that. Everything came from one point.
No.
But what? I deny science.
So what I would say is that Big Bang cosmology represents the current best understanding and explanation for the facts that we have about the origin of the universe.
But yes,
like every scientific position, it's tentative. We're not claiming it's true. We're just saying this model is the one that best explains the available information.
Yeah, but what most scientists say in documentaries and everything is that time and space happened there. It started there. That's what they assume. You know, and what
one sec for a sec, Jamen. Let's just grant, for the sake of argument, let's grant you it, whatever. That's fine. But that still doesn't answer Matt's objection, though, which is that outside of time and space doesn't seem like it. That's why he used I can't do it. Flurgler, whatever it was, right? Because he's demonstrating. I can never pronounce it. What he's attempting to demonstrate there is that you can essentially propose anything imaginary in this spot. Like this flying spaghetti monster is the same sort of thing, right? You can propose an imaginary thing that has unprovable properties in any number of scenarios and assert it.
If you don't have a testable, falsifiable proposition, right, we're kind of stuck. And so if you say that you're defining God as a creator who exists outside of space and time, I don't see how that proposition is testable or falsifiable.
Yeah, well, first of all, what most people misconcept about God is that they want proof with science, but how we define it,
I would
we can't
accept.
even see.
Hang on. Hang on. Let Jamen say this. Well, you're saying most people have a misconception because they want proof of God through science. So what's wrong with that?
Yeah, no, because it's completely the wrong category.
How do you know?
Can't even see.
How do you know?
No, we can't even. Science only talks about things that we can measure.
Yeah, no.
Like
Here's the thing, Yaman. Here's the thing. Science talks about the natural world. If you're proposing something that science can't investigate, that's fine, but you have to come up with a methodology that shows why we should believe it's true. Because science isn't saying those things don't exist. Please let me finish. Science isn't saying those things don't exist. Science is saying we can't test those things. And so when I objected, saying that your definition of God is untestable and unfalsifiable, you basically replied by agreeing with me that it's untestable and falsifiable and suggesting that we have some other way of knowing other than science. What is that way of knowing, and how do we determine if it's reliable?
Bingo.
One argument I have that's no atheists. That's why I came onto this show, because no other atheist could kind of tell me a definite answer. Because one argument is that the chain of causality, that everything has a reason. Something that's put in there, like so it's on the table because I put it there.
Yaman, I asked for a methodology that would allow you to confirm a way of knowing that would get you to your otherwise untestable, unfalsifiable proposition. And instead of answering that question, you offered up an argument that is within the bounds of knowing, that is within the bounds of exploratory epistemic evaluation, but it also begins with the absurdity of an undefined thing of everything happens for a reason. I want to know what methodology you have that can confirm the existence of God where science cannot.
Well, that is where I wanted to go to, because, if science can answer these things, because it's outside of our measurements, and also with the start of the universe, because we can't really know what we can't measure, but we still want answers, you know.
Yaman,
and Yaman, you just admitted yourself that you can't know, though. Like you're saying.
No, I'm not going to allow you to distract us this way. I'm asking about a methodology, and your response is to go back to origins. Do you understand what a methodology is? What method, what process can you use to confirm the existence of God where science cannot do this? What method do you have that you can point to that says, here's the methodology that will confirm the existence of something that science can't?
Well, what I wanted to say with the chain of causality is that...
No, sir. I am done. I am done dealing with people who refuse to answer the question. Please, I'm going to go ahead and let you go now. We're going to take some other callers who might be willing to answer the questions that were asked instead of just wanting to say what they want to say. Work on finding a methodology that confirms the existence of God when science cannot. If you do that, you'll probably get a Nobel Prize for discovering and verifying a reliable pathway to knowledge that circumvents the single most consistently reliable method that we know.
The chains of causality of that best will get you to a sufficient cause, and then you label it God, and then and he also admitted he couldn't know.
If you start talking about causal chains, now first of all, we may not fully understand causality, and there are debates even within philosophical views about whether or not a causal chain needs to necessarily be temporal with a precedent, or whether there could be co-current causality, and at the end of the day, all you're doing with a philosophical argument like that is trying to find some gap in humans' knowledge and present something where it feels okay to stick a God in as an answer. And you're never going to convince me using anything like that. I'm pretty sure you're never going to convince Shannon using something like that. And that's because we see through that as a fallacy. Because in order to determine that something is real and believable, what you need is evidence, and you need a model that allows you to gather and evaluate that evidence to determine whether or not something's rational. And if you propose something that's untestable and unfalsifiable through scientific means, that doesn't mean you're wrong, but you have to come up with a model to test it. And you can't do that by saying, oh, well, I wanted to talk about this argument about causality. No, because those things are testable within science.
Yeah. And it just
to the extent that we have an answer when we may not. But
I'm not going to keep talking when the caller's not even on the line. We'll take another one.
That's fair. Well, we have Javier in, is it Minnesota? Welcome to the show. You're on with Shannon and Matt. How can we help?
How's it going? Hey, I just have a question. Do you guys do anything wrong in a person just believing in God to make them feel good?
Well,
did he just say, do we see anything wrong in a person believing in God just to make them feel good? I just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
yes, that is what I heard.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Okay, perfect.
Is that correct, Javier?
Yes.
Sweet. Go
Okay,
ahead, Shan.
thank you. Do I see anything wrong? I guess that kind of depends on what you mean by wrong. Also, like morally, do I believe that somebody can have a mental state that affects no one else but themselves because it makes them feel good? No, so long as it's just a mental state that affects no one but themselves and doesn't affect themselves detrimentally. Now, then you've got a long road to hoe after that, because that almost doesn't exist as a reality in the world, right? So people's beliefs inform their actions, right? So people's beliefs inform their actions, people's beliefs inform their relationships, and people's beliefs inform their perceptions of themselves. So do I see anything wrong in this hypothetical that doesn't really exist in reality? No. If you gave me a real life scenario, could I almost invariably find something wrong with it? Yeah, absolutely. But we don't exist in the realms of hypothetical, non-existent questions. We exist in the real world where what I said stands, and what people believe informs their actions. And people don't believe in a God in a vacuum, most likely. It's wrapped in a belief structure, in a societal structure, in an infrastructure of community. It's wrapped in a doctrine. It's wrapped in perceptions of how they must behave and treat other people and interact with one another. And those all can have deleterious effects on the people themselves and the people around them. So in your hypothetical that doesn't exist, then sure, maybe not. But in reality, I think that you would need something more concrete. But most of these hypotheticals are posed just so that you can get an atheist to say something along the lines of, well, yeah, obviously just your belief isn't an issue, but then it's ignoring all of the reality that unfolds from somebody's belief system. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I actually go a step further in that while I would be fine with the notion that there might be somebody out there who believes in a God, and this specific belief itself doesn't have that much impact on what they do, and therefore doesn't have that much negative impact on the world. And I would still object, because if in fact it is not true that a God exists and you believe that there is a God, that means that your brain has gone through some heuristic process to reach a conclusion that is false. And if in fact your brain is going through a process to reach that conclusion, there's no reason to think that only that subject is affected by that process. Basically, we like to reuse things, including the heuristics we do. Today is pretty much the same as yesterday. We rely mostly on inference and induction. And if the process that led one to believe there was a God, how do you know that that's not going to lead you to believe other things? This is the reason why I advocate for skepticism. This is the reason why I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. Because if my internal model of reality starts to depart from reality, how do you stop that from cascading? I'm not saying that it's okay. Everybody's going to be wrong about something. I'm sure Shannon and I have each been wrong about, well, Shannon's only been wrong about one thing today, but I've been wrong about probably 50 things today. But
I was wrong about with you.
Does a God belief, is it necessarily bad? No. But if in fact it's not true, then it is necessarily a problem because a brain has reached a wrong conclusion. And if it turns out that their God belief is true, then at a minimum, they're now believing something that they can't demonstrate, which is itself a problem. Having beliefs, strong beliefs that you cannot demonstrate, that itself is a problem. Hopefully that, between the two of us, hopefully we got to your answer.
Would it be the same thing as, let's see if gender dysphoria? Wouldn't it be the same thing?
Dysphoria?
No, because gender, so first of all, gender is separate, being separate from sex is, hang on. I don't want to have to mute you, but I will. Gender, being separate from genetic sex, presents itself in a number of different ways. One of them is gender identity, the gender that you internally associate with. This is a product of an individual's mind. There's not some external necessary truth to it. If I say that my identity is a man, or that my identity is as a woman, or my identity is as neither, that's just true. Then separate from gender identity is this notion of gendered expression, which is how we express to the rest of the world what our internal gender identity is, to the extent that we want them to know. And that could be how we put on makeup, or facial hair, or body hair, or the clothing that we wear, or the pronouns that we use. There's nothing about that. It's not like saying, oh, I believe I'm this gender, and actually, I could be wrong about it. You can't be wrong. You can be wrong in the sense of not completely understanding who you are. But if you are convinced that this is who you are, it's no more wrong than I like vanilla ice cream.
Oh, I get that part. Like people deciding what they are, but like a biological male that wants to get pregnant. I mean, isn't that a sort of dysphoria?
Well, right now, it's not really. It's first of all, it's not outside the realm of science. As a matter of fact, I think there has already been a biological male that was pregnant, right?
Science
that I'm aware of.
I thought there. I don't know, but there's no reason that we couldn't transplant a womb and work towards those sorts of things within science. But the desire. Hang on, Javier. Hang on. The desire to be pregnant is not a delusion.
If you're a man, isn't it?
No, I could desperately want to be pregnant and just still be recognizing the physical facts about science that my biology currently prohibits me from being pregnant. But I could spend my entire life desiring to be pregnant. That is not dysphoria. That is not delusion. And by the way, why did we, Javier, stop talking? Why did we shift from a discussion about belief in a God and whether or not those beliefs and how they're formed represent something bad to a discussion about gender and pregnancy? Because those things are not remotely in the same fucking ballpark.
I was talking
They're
about
not beliefs.
They're not beliefs.
They're not beliefs. They're not beliefs, Javier. I have been dying to talk. Javier. They are not beliefs. Do I believe I am a woman? That's a legitimate question. Do I believe I am a woman, Javier?
I know you're.
Do you think? I know I'm a woman. Oh, I know I'm a woman. How do I know I'm a woman? What properties do I have mentally that make me a woman?
A vagina.
Oh, I have a mental vagina? I have a mental vagina, Javier. Can you see my vagina? Do you know if I have a vagina? Stop talking. I'm frustrated with you right now because you don't want. No, it's fine. I'm going to ask him some questions. Here's the problem. This was a Trojan horse for somebody who wants to get transphobic rhetoric on the air, but I really want to make this point. Because Javier, I will mute you. So help me. Don't test me. Do not mistake my kindness for weakness. You cannot see whether I do or do not have a vagina, Javier. So what your assessment of whether or not I am a woman is not based on that because you cannot see it. You are basing it on something completely different. You're basing it on a configuration of societal standards and my personal presentation. That is what you're basing it on, along with my self-declaration to you that I am a woman. That is what you are basing it on. And that is not a mistake. And it is not a mistake when a trans person does it. It is not. So if you want to call in here again with your Trojan horse talking about how a belief that is false is somehow equivalent with knowing who you are, as though you think it's some sort of gotcha, you picked the wrong day and you picked the wrong pony because I have no tolerance for bigots. Got it?
No, I not at all. I wasn't trying to get there. This is why I asked this specific question. Because, I mean...
Okay, so do you understand a little bit better then? Because you need to stop making the false equivalence that believing something that is false is the same in any way, shape, or form as somebody knowing who they are. You don't get to decide that.
I am Mexican. I am Mexican, right? I cannot say I'm white, I'm black. I can't say I'm a lot of stuff I'm not.
You don't get it. You don't get it then, Javier. You do not get it. You didn't listen to a word that I said because you're trying to make another false equivalence.
Yeah. Whether or not you're Mexican is a statement of fact. But race, like gender, is a social construct. Ethnicity is not a social construct other than we are pointing to groups and determining how much you fit into there. So this is why your distraction. You see, first of all, you say you're not trying to get there. I don't believe you, and Shannon doesn't believe you, because you came in with a really simple thing about belief. And belief, by the way, is the acceptance of a proposition as true. And so you could say, here's a proposition. Shannon is a woman. Shannon believes that proposition is true. And you would be completely correct. And yet you're not talking about gender or gender identity at all, because that's separate from believing a proposition. This is about understanding and knowing how one feels about one's identity and how one wants to express it. This is not the same with regard to whether or not you happen to be genetically related to people that fit into a category of Hispanics. It's just not.
Oh, it's exactly the same. I mean, I can't identify.
No, sir.
No, it's not, unless you're a racist who thinks that there's a confluence of things that are affiliated with your race that compile who you are as a part of that race. Like a gender identity is something that there is a societal affiliate with. Is there something that there's a societal affiliate with that it is true to say about somebody who is a specific race? Because the moment that you say that, you are going into racist propaganda. That's the false equivalence.
No. I'm asking. It's exactly the same thing.
It is not exactly the same thing.
Here, I'm being incredibly zen today, and will continue to be. And I want to give you the best possible answers. I swear to God, if you say it's the same thing one more time, I will curse you out and hang up on you. So let's avoid that. And I suggest that you call in to the Transatlantic Call-In Show next Saturday and talk to Katie and Arden about this subject, because then you will get not only the same, an improved response over Shannon and myself, but you will get it directly from people who are trans rather than listening to a couple of cis people talking about this.
Yeah.
And since you're marching around with such monumental ignorance, both about the nature of belief and about the nature of gender and race, I'm going to save you from embarrassing yourself and being ripped apart by Shannon and the people in the chat. And I'm going to go on to another caller. If you're not familiar with how to reach out and find the Transatlantic Call-In Show, send me an email. I'm sure my girlfriend would love to talk to you. Sorry, honey.
I lost my zen.
Oh, and sorry, that wasn't for Shannon. That was for her.
I lost my zen.
It's okay. We've got Nick. Oh, wait. I apologize. Nick, we'll get right to you. Nick will be next. I completely forgot because there's a bump here for a message. In addition to all the other things that we've linked out and everything else, one of my new favorite parts of every weekend, apart from getting to interact with you guys, is when we take a look at all the other things that have been happening on the Atheist Experience Network. So here you go.
Now that I'm like this sort of pseudo quasi celebrity with the Atheist Experience Network, I have thought about whether or not I should go back and maybe get rid of that old Twitter account.
I really like the idea of a Victorian girl just like coming back from the dead just to say that you're cute. I think that's great.
We have one Xenia Ovchinnikova. She is suing McDonald's for 1,000 rubles, which is about $13.
The fact that you think you can sidestep the rigorous standards we apply in science because it suits your presumption in the first place is not my problem.
It's not working. In fact, you're only hardening my heart, much like God hardened the Pharaoh's heart. And I don't want a calcified heart. I'm going to need it later.
I don't know. I can't think of a better reason to start tuning into the other stuff. And actually, most of those I actually got to see live, even though I've had a wild and busy week. And now I pretty much guarantee you that, like, I'm going to bet money that I don't appear in any clips for the Atheist Experience for the next couple of months. Like, I'm pretty sure Shannon Fire is going to be clipped out next week. And it's awesome.
I just lose it when people are so. Oh, I need to be better. I should be better. I'll get Zenner.
You're awesome, and everybody loves it. And you did the right thing. Anyway, we've kept Nick waiting. Nick in California wants to tell us why he believes in Jesus, and this is exactly what we asked for. So welcome, Nick.
Yes.
Please fill us in.
Hey, no, I was just talking to my nephew here, and I've never heard of you guys or anything. It's my first time even listening to you. And he went to college and went in a believer and came out an unbeliever, and asked me if I'd ever heard of you guys, and I said no. And he said, well, I'd sure love to hear you talk to him. And I said, well, sure, I'll talk to him. I'll talk to anybody. So that's really all I'm doing. I'm just calling you guys and saying hey, and
awesome.
Seeing what you got to say, and I'll talk to you.
Since you don't know, I'll give you the super quick rundown. I walked down the aisle at the age of 5 at a Southern Baptist church and accepted Jesus into my heart and was active in the ministry all the way up until I was around 18 or so, and then I went in the Navy. And then around age 30 or so, I decided to take it seriously, and had a roommate who was an atheist, didn't want him to go to hell. And so I set out trying to find out how to convince an atheist of the truth of the gospel that I knew and believed to be the truth. And in the process, I found out that all those good reasons I thought I had aren't actually good reasons. They're fallacies and bad evidence. And that this led me to a point where I could no longer be a Christian and eventually could no longer believe in any sort of God. And so when you say that you believe in Jesus, I'm wondering why. And by the way, what would convince you you're wrong?
Well, I'll tell you, there's nothing that'll convince me I'm wrong. Ever.
Okay. In that case, Nick, I'm going to let you continue, and I'm going to shut up. But could you understand?
Too. So did you probably.
Could you understand why it would be a waste of time for anyone to have a conversation with you when you say you're closed-minded and nothing can change your mind? You're basically telling me it's impossible for you to be wrong. You're basically declaring that you have godlike intellect and knowledge. So thank you, God, for showing up.
Can I convince you that you're wrong?
Yes. By providing evidence and presenting arguments supported by evidence that, in fact, there is a God and that you're right about this Jesus being the God.
I love learning when I'm wrong because that means that I learned something new.
Yeah. See, I used to believe.
Well, if you listen long enough, you'll find out you're wrong.
Oh, is that a veiled threat that eventually I'm going to have to stand before God? Because I'm not interested in unsupported assertions and all you're doing. No. Okay.
No, you said you're going to listen to me, so you listen to me, and I said if we talk long enough, and if we were able to. I'm sorry.
Okay, go.
Well, listen, I'm not Javier. Hey, listen, I'm not Javier. So take it easy. I'm not Javier. Okay. So all I'm trying to tell you is,
Nick,
go ahead. You just said you're going to let me talk, but go ahead. I noticed you do that with everybody, but go ahead.
I thought you didn't know who I was. I thought you didn't know anything about the show.
No, you just told me that just about 2 minutes ago. You said you're going to let me talk.
No.
You haven't yet, but that's okay. Go ahead.
But you just said I do that to everybody else, which suggests that you're a liar.
I'm getting it. Hey,
it suggests that you're a liar, Nick. And that you only want to call and listen to yourself talk. So if you'll shut up for one more second here, I will stop talking in a second and let you present your case. But what I want to say is that it doesn't matter whether you're Javier. Please stop waving your arms around distractingly as if, look, I'm not Javier, I'm not this, I'm not this. If you are in fact a sincere follower of a particular God and you have good reasons for believing that God, you should be able to present them without trying to insult other callers or us. Can you do that, or are you just faking it?
No, the callers, you insulted Javier by the way you talked to him. You were
Nick, are you going to be a whiny little bitch all day, or are you going to get to the point?
Okay.
Javier didn't have.
Okay. Is Nick done?
I don't know, Nick. Are you going to say something other than whine?
Nick, stop talking about Javier. Give us your argument. I would love to hear your argument. I'm ready to listen to it.
Are you?
Let's hear it.
Or you
I
ready?
just said I was. No, Matt, it's fine. I just said I'm ready. Go ahead. I'm ready. Go.
Okay. Okay. What do you want me to tell you?
Jesus
Why I should
fucking
believe in
Christ.
God? Why should I believe in God, Nick? You said if I listened for a bit,
Have you observed?
I'd learn some stuff.
Have you observed creation? Have you observed creation at all ever? I'm a landscape.
I can observe. I can observe reality. When you label it creation, you're just begging the question. I can observe reality. Calling it creation begs the question that there's a creator, which means that it's a presuppositionalist position. You're calling it creation because you're presupposing a creator. I can observe reality. I don't call it creation. I just call it reality.
Okay, so who made the seed? That made the
Who
whole
made the seed?
Where'd that come from?
Nature just does stuff. Nature does stuff. So like the universe exists and nature emerges from the uniform. Really, Nick? Come on. Like this
Nick,
is
when
like
you say-
D-level best.
Hang on, Nick. When you say who made the seed, you're asking a fallacious question because your question presumes that it was a who. Nick, are you going to keep trying to talk over me? What we're asking you is to present your evidence. Are you going to do that, or are you going to keep popping out questions that demonstrate how little you understand this?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Where did the seed come from?
The seed comes from a tree. If it's a tree seed, a seed comes from the organism that it is produced by.
Yeah.
Because,
Where'd the organism come from?
From the organisms that preceded it.
Okay, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I know that sounds funny, but what came first, the chicken or the egg?
The egg.
Because chickens didn't exist until much after.
Then what sat on the egg? Hey, what sat on the egg so that the egg
probably dinosaurs.
Huh?
What is
Nick,
are you being serious, Nick? I don't think you're being serious.
Nick, we're having a really difficult time here taking you seriously. Instead of asking these questions, which even if you got to a point where you got a got you, it doesn't provide evidence for a God.
I'm not looking for a got you.
Nick, I'm still talking. Why do you keep trying to talk over me? Do you have actual evidence and an argument to present?
No, I don't. I told you I was sitting here talking to my nephew because he was a believer and he became an.
Then goodbye. Thank you for admitting that you don't have evidence or argument to present. Thank you for admitting that you called in and lied to us and pretended that you didn't know who I was while you tried to complain that I do something that I don't always do, although I have done it many, many times. You epically failed, Nick, and I'm sure Jesus is proud of you for your epic failure to call in and admit that as a follower of Jesus, you don't have argument or evidence to present. Truly, your side has a strong champion, and we appreciate it. Why don't you call back another week when you don't have argument or evidence to present?
All I was going to do was get back to maybe abiogenesis, and then neither of us can assert that we, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatevs.
Ooh, what was the first life form? I don't know. She doesn't know.
What was before that? What was before that? What was before that?
Yeah. Nick doesn't know either. I mean, it is kindergarten theology, and it's a very, very flawed and minimalistic understanding of science or philosophy. It's not worth the audience's time, and so we just won't waste the audience's time on it.
Conversation so bad, and now I'm afraid that I set a poor precedent because I got yelly. Sorry.
Well, I think we should take an atheist call. So, Barry in New Zealand, how you doing?
Hi, Barry.
Oh, evidently, Barry in New Zealand dropped as soon as I made it live.
Oh no.
Let's try this. Rob in Georgia has some questions about heaven. So, hi, Rob.
Hello. I called back, or I called before, and you told me to call back. But I actually am more interested in the time thing now, the idea of God outside of time and space. The original thing I was curious about was if Gnostic atheists often say that the idea of heaven sounds horrifying. I've never really understood that. It seems that they that the idea of being in such a state with, even if it's not infinite possibilities, innumerable things to focus on without the human discomfort of fear, anxiety, loneliness. If I could take a pill to become immortal and to become pansexual, I would take it immediately, because that would get rid of my biases and my fear of death. So I'm wondering what your view of a Gnostic atheist view of that is.
I'm going to jump in super quick and then get the hell out of the way. Because first of all, I don't know what being pansexual would have to do with that, but cool. For me, the notion, specific versions of heaven sound very hellish to me. Because it takes away the things that make me me. When somebody says there's no sadness in heaven, I can appreciate the fact that a naive understanding of the world would be one where we say, we want a world with no sadness. But that is not a good understanding of what happens and what should happen in a world where there's freedom, in a world where there's choice, and a world where there's love. Because things that make you sad, you can grow from, so that those things don't necessarily make you sad in the same way. But to be told that I would be forced, that I have no freedom to leave, that I have no freedom to make up my own mind, that I'm going to sit here and be servile and praising for all eternity, I don't think I would want to praise for one whole day, let alone the entirety of eternity. And so for some versions of heaven, they sound like hell to me personally. And if you're just going to say, everybody gets their own paradise, cool. Granted, you have no more evidence for that than anything else, but where are you at on heaven, Shannon?
So similarly, I can't imagine that it would be a happy state should I be separated from people I love, for example. So let's say I convert to Christianity today and I get to go to heaven, but my son stays an atheist or becomes an atheist. He's still quite young, so he's not quite sure where he's landing yet. So let's say he lands atheist and I land Christian, and Christianity is true. I go to heaven. When he passes, he doesn't get to be there. So that means that I'm eternally separated from what's essentially the love of my life. How can I be happy that way? And given the way that the infrastructure exists, it sounds as though what you're saying, or what other people say, or the way that it's been proposed to me, is that something will happen to make me happy, which means that something will happen in my mind to make me be happy, even though in my existent state, I know for a fact I could not be happy like that. So it would either have to fundamentally change who I am in order to make me ostensibly happy, or I would have to be unhappy, which is a state that apparently can't exist there. So that's the paradigm that I have an issue with. Does that make sense as an example?
I think so. And, by the way, while I don't consider myself trans, I do use they, them pronouns. So I agreed a lot with what was said before. But, yeah.
Sorry, I was yelling. I could have done better there. I could have said things in a different tone.
My apologies, Rob, because this is one of the few shows where call screeners aren't just default asking and putting it in there. We should start.
We should start. Absolutely. Yes, please.
I'll just say that my preference, pass it on to the crew, is that we just start asking so the pronouns exist there. And anybody who doesn't want to answer doesn't have to answer.
Sounds good.
Cosign.
Okay. And
Rob.
Can I mention what you told me to call about last time I called? You told me to call back and let you know how certain things went.
Sure, absolutely. Give us an update.
Okay. Last time I used an abbreviation of one of my given names, which wasn't a good idea. So this time I went with Rob. But I'm the person who called about trying to describe the idea of the Trinity as like Piccolo from DBZ dividing himself into multiple forms. But when they come back together, he has all the memories. And I just viewed El as the one that was constantly aware, Yeshua as a lessered form for our sake, and the Holy Spirit as a way we describe what God does, but isn't actually separate. As far as the non-religious stuff, I've been dealing with homelessness, which is now resolved. I've been renting a basement that was converted into a duplex for more than a year, so I think I'm housing stable. The depression and other things regarding my sexuality have actually gotten worse, but being in a stable place hopefully will help with that in the future. But as far as the time and space thing, for the sake of the show, I think if we think about it sincerely, what people mean when they say outside of time and space is that El sees, or God sees, all of the time of this universe almost like a structure that can be affected, and that they exist outside of space in the sense of outside of our space. But I think if God does anything, time's needed for that, and if God is, space is needed for that.
I like the fact that you went to a fictional fantasy creation to try to come up with a justification for something else that appears to be a fictional fantasy creation. Like, it's not like anybody has any evidence that there is a God or that God is outside of time and space. And yet you seem to be really focused on trying to come up with a way where that makes sense, rather than doing the work that needs to take place first, which is this actually true? Because if it's not true, then every second you've spent trying to make it make sense was wasted.
There's a strong argument there, and I think I would very much prefer the comparative comfort of being a Gnostic atheist. I desire that. I think I've listened to most all of Aaron Roth's stuff, and I can, as good of an evangelical as I used to be, I think I'm equally good at converting people away from religious ideas that scare me now. But I seem to be unable to actually not be theistic. I have that sense of a presence. I have a sense of awareness of something hearing what I say. If I blaspheme in certain ways that I'm not confident aren't true, El Allah, Yahweh, Jehovah, Elohim, those descriptions in the Bible are nonsensical. I can say that, but I
and yet you stick with the labels.
I seem to be theistic in that I do believe and have no choice to believe. It's like free will. Of course I have free will. I have no choice but to have free will. I don't know if becoming a Gnostic atheist would help me with
I don't know what, Rob,
anxiety or depression, but yeah.
Rob, I don't. So first of all, you get rid of El and Yahweh and everything else, but you keep using the labels. You also talked about doing a pretty good job of leading people away from ideas and that scare you. But I'm not here as a skeptic. Skepticism isn't let's do something about those ideas that scare us. It's about whether or not something is true and believable. And so there are plenty of scary things that are true. Cancer's really fucking scary, and yet it's true. And so it seems like you're doing better. I wish you would get away from the wrong questions, which is this scary? Is it problematic? How does this make sense of a God outside of space-time? And get to the questions that truly matter, which is any of this true? Because, and you don't need to be a Gnostic atheist or an atheist of any stripe at all. You seem to be putting up this, I'm either a theist, but a fuzzy one, and I don't know what else, or I'm a Gnostic atheist, and that would be most comfortable for me. And I wish that I was Gnostic atheist and pansexual. And it's not an all or nothing thing. This is not a zero-sum game. You can just say, I don't have good reasons to believe these things, and therefore I'm not going to believe them until somebody demonstrates a good reason. And that can be for every single aspect of it, no matter what label you're putting on it, and no matter whether you think you're comfortable with being a Gnostic atheist or not.
May I ask them a question?
So replacing faults with unknown. Sure.
Rob, may I ask you a question? Are you currently certain that it's true there's a God of some sort, or are you currently comforted somehow by the thought that there's a God of some sort?
It's a little bit harder than that. It's more like if I start to try to express certain things, it's almost like the feeling of like a parental figure fingers on the back of my shoulder. And again, that sense of someone with me, a present, someone hearing or responding with emotional sensations, making me feel things, that type of thing.
So do you think that that could potentially be a form of mental programming or indoctrination that has caused you to have that mental scaffolding? Do you derive a benefit from the belief? Because it sounds to me like you're consistently calling in and that aspects of yourself are butting up against this belief. So are you currently deriving something positive from this belief, or is this belief a source of strife that you're looking to overcome?
Well, it seems this is the second time I've called, and I don't think I've seen an episode between the two calls, so maybe that's a failing on my part. But as far as whether or not it's useful, I don't know. My sexuality is such that when I was religious, I thought God was calling me to the ministry and giving me something socially inappropriate so that I could empathize with the struggles of other people. And I desire to have the comfort of being a religious leader, of being a guide. I am, as much as I desire the comfort of confident disbelief, I also have a great longing for going back to a church and being religious and having that a community.
Right. So you long for a sense of community, and you were raised in a structure where you were essentially taught that your sexuality or your sexual orientation was something that was problematic, and you perceived it as being a challenge that was given to you so that you could be more relatable to people who you would be preaching to. Am I understanding that correctly? That's how you read that life experience?
Well, I guess since I'm not using my name, I might as well say that I'm not attracted to people my age, and I haven't been since high school, and that's been devastating and scary. And
like you're attracted to older people?
No,
Please say
I'm
older
not,
people,
and
Rob.
that's why it's so scary.
You need to seek
I'm
help
not
for that.
attracted to people my age.
You need to
I
seek some help,
understand, but
Rob.
it's not something. Yeah, I understand, but it's not related to the religious stuff, and it's just a line on a spectrum, the age range I happen to be attracted to. But it's always been true since high school, so that's why I was avoiding mentioning it, because even among non-believers, it has a very powerful negative emotional response.
As it should.
You can understand that, though. That's an appropriate response. The negative emotional response is an appropriate response to that, though. Rob. You understand that, though, right, Rob?
Yes, I understand, and I also understand that counseling would be helping me live with it, not curing me of it, because it's not something that I can change. But that's why I avoid talking about it, because.
So,
Go
Rob,
ahead.
I'm gonna jump in here because we're running short on time. First of all, I'd recommend that you perhaps consider calling secular sexuality, but more so than calling a show, you need to get treatment. I've been on a campaign for many years to correct people about misunderstandings about pedophilia and the difference between pederasty. There may be people who have an attraction that they have no choice over, and they never act upon that, and that this is good that they never act on this, but it requires some help. And it doesn't mean that we just sit here and go, well, there's nothing that can be done about that, so I guess it's not a big deal. You're going to need to get the help the best help you can, to make sure that you don't ever find yourself in a position where you do something that hurts another human being. I'm going to stop now because there's a couple other calls to get to, and this part of the conversation isn't relevant to your God belief or anything else. But yes, the Psychotherapy Project, psychosexuality, and just finding a good therapist that can deal with this are going to go a long way towards making sure that you don't find yourself becoming the example that makes this a mess for everybody.
A quick response before the call-ins. As far as the way people react to that, at least from the research I've seen, it's less likely than on average. There's no association as far as negative or violent actions. But I was meaning to talk about religion, and I
Rob?
wish I hadn't corrected that misconception on her part, because then we'd be talking about religion. But I understand the call needs to end.
Yeah, and I'm not the slightest bit impressed with your attempt to smooth things over, because I haven't seen a good correlation between that and violence. It is fucking violence. That's the point, Rob. Stop. You need.
No, you misunderstand.
No,
I wasn't talking
I'm
about.
done talking to you about this, Rob. That's what I understand. Have a good day.
About.
I'm done, Rob. Do we understand that?
Yeah.
Get some help.
Yes, I just wasn't talking about that.
Rob, never mind.
Homeless
Goodbye.
people can't
Goodbye.
get help.
Goodbye. If your defense to something is to say, well, I read some stuff, there's not the strong connection between this and violence, you've misunderstood, and you are engaged in a process of rationalizing. I like other people would like for Rob and everyone else with an attraction that can be dangerous to get help and avoid ever taking action that might hurt another person. I'm not talking about you're a bad person or it's your fault or anything remotely like that. But if you're still in the mode where you're trying to find a way to soften it so that it doesn't feel as much of a problem as it is, you're not getting help. And I'm not going to be the person who advocates alongside for that. I got a couple more calls that I want to get to. One of them may be kind of short here. We got Jeffrey in Texas has a little dilemma on morality. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thanks. I didn't think I'd get to the call. I appreciate it, Matt. I'm just going to get to the questions. I have 4 questions and a bonus question, I guess.
Bonus question.
Well, basically, it's about the moral dilemma, the moral argument, and basically, if the moral code, whatever moral code that we have, if it's subjective to culture, to our current times, how does that basically? I don't think I put it here correctly, but where can I find basically my moral code if it's subjected to our culture? That's my first question.
So I'm opposed to the notion that morality is based only on culture, because that means if a culture says something that's right, then it's right. But the foundation of morality in my system is well-being. It is subjective because you don't have to care about well-being if you don't want to. But if you and I can agree that we do care about well-being, all of a sudden we can now make objective assessments of actions and their consequences with respect to the goal of well-being. And so while the foundation, well-being, is subjective, to object to that is like saying, I don't care about making the world better. And you don't have to. But if you do care about making the world better, there are objective facts that we can discover. That's it.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I want to add something because I've thought about this quite a bit, and maybe this will help with some of the other questions, is baked into the definition of morality is our general concepts like either well-being or alleviation of harm or avoidance of harm or increasing and flourishing. Like I've heard multiple variations, but those are baked into the definition. So when people make the argument that, oh, well, if morality is subjective, then anything goes, you also have to throw away the definition of what morality even is in order to make that argument. You have to say morality now means something it never meant before. Because if you can agree that morals are this subset of, I've heard people define them all those different ways, like increased well-being, alleviation of harm, or flourishing. Those are usually the 3 that I hear, but that's baked into the definition, right? So to say, well, anything goes and now you can murder people and I can call that morality. Well, no, you can't unless now you're changing the way that word works so that it means the opposite of what it initially meant. So when you're saying morality is subjective, sorry, go ahead.
No, Sam Harris in The Moral Landscape came up with an analogy that works pretty well, which is health. What does it mean to be healthy? Well, it's not well defined. Certainly we could say you're healthier if you're not dead. But what's healthy for one person isn't necessarily identical to what's healthy for another person. And yet at no point would it be reasonable to say, hey, drinking battery acid is healthy. I mean, that's just a fact. And so I think what a lot of people want is a moral code that is simple and put it in a package, and now we don't have to do any work. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, honor thy father and mother, boom, 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 got it all done. And the world is far too complicated for anything like that to ever be possible. However, the fact that we don't have all the answers right now, and the fact that the answers aren't easy, doesn't mean that it's an anything goes system. Even to the extent that our desire for well-being and the health of a society is ultimately subjective, because nothing says you have to care about health or well-being. But if you do, once you agree to that, now we're on footing where we can say, okay, let's take a look at the data. Let's show what makes a system healthier. Let's show what increases societal health, and let's show what doesn't. Because there are some things like how short a skirt is may not be in any way, shape, or form a moral question, despite the fact that people have been making pronouncements about the morality of short skirts for decades, if not longer. And so figuring out what sort of issues we should focus on, we're going to have questions coming down the pipe in not too distant future about identity and cloning and genetic code and what's moral and what belongs to whom. And yet I'm finding that I'm having a difficult time getting past people who don't want people of the same gender to love each other and be married. And that's a problem for me, because that should be none of your guys' business. And yet people are making pronouncements about, I don't mean you specifically, Jeffrey, but I mean, people are making pronouncements about that from a moral standpoint. We have got to hurry up and move on. I want to make sure, because I want to get to one more caller. I'd love to talk to you some more about this, because you seem to have a confusion that hopefully we've cleared some of it up, but some people confuse objective morality with absolute morality, and those aren't the same thing. But you might go look up my lecture on the superiority of secular morality for kind of a baseline, although my thoughts have changed. Okay. But I appreciate the call, Jeffrey, and call us back. I got one more call I want to get to before the day's over.
All right, will do. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks.
I love talking morality. It's my favorite subject.
I love it. And maybe if he calls back next week, because you're going to be on, maybe.
I'm going to be here again next week. Yeah,
you're going to be here
that's
next
right.
week, because I'm working a magic convention.
Easter famine.
and you're awesome. So here we go. Final call of the day. We're a little bit over time. I appreciate both my co-host and the audience and crew's patience. But Josh in the Netherlands, thank you so much for your patience. Let's see if we can't help you kind of quickly.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to make it brief. Thank you for still letting me on, by the way. So I was wondering, I had a question for both you guys, actually. It's not necessarily an argument trying to convince you guys, but I have been a theist for a long time. I was a Muslim convert for about 6 years, and I got kind of reasoned out of it. Can you still hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I got kind of reasoned out of it by, well, among others, you, but also other new atheists and atheist friends, and eventually I just felt I couldn't, fully accept, the Islamic system as a whole. But what I do still feel in my heart, I'm not sure if you guys still feel this, is that religion as a system kind of provides kind of like a toolbox to kind of practice spirituality, express spirituality, and these systems have been there for a long time and work for a reason. And I feel like having this taken away from me kind of makes it difficult to practice it again. And I was wondering if you guys feel the same, because I heard Matt talk earlier about being a pastor and feeling very convinced about it, but you got reasoned out of it due to logical reasons and
This is really easy for me, Josh, so I'll just answer this and let Shannon jump in. I have no clue what spirituality is. It's a word that seems to mean a million different things to a million different people. I don't know why anybody would say, "Oh, if I give up religion, then I can't practice spirituality." What is it that you're missing? What is it that you're practicing? Because I have no interest or desire in practicing something when I don't know what it is. And spirituality seems to be the soft, fuzzy word that people toss around to sound like something when it's nothing.
Gotcha. Okay. I guess it is used in many different ways, right? I guess someone like Sam Harris pointing to, a deeper truth about reality, right? Like a subjective experience that you could connect with. either in a meditative context or maybe in a religious context, right? He sees some
I'm
baby
not in any way beholden to any. I'm not in any way beholden to anything that Sam said. And if Sam says that the spirituality is a path to a deeper truth or understanding, then he needs to tell us what that deeper truth or understanding is. But that doesn't change the fact that you're asking about something. Tell us what it is you're asking about. Don't mention Sam Harris or anybody else, because I don't give a fuck what any of them have said. I don't know what spirituality means. I don't know what I'm missing by not practicing spirituality. Enlighten me.
Right. Okay. No, I was mentioning him because I thought maybe you'd be familiar with his views on it, right? So I used.
I've toured with the man. I've had conversations with the man. What he says about spirituality doesn't fucking matter at all right now. I need to talk to you.
Sure. So what I would say is what I would have experienced is, which is why I mentioned him, because it sounded very similar to what I experienced in an Islamic context, is once you get into a certain, let's say, meditative state, I use meditative here or a state of prayer, maybe you recognize it, where you kind of connect in a world so that you kind of cut through the ego, or you become...
the ego. Yeah, oh, gosh.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. When I hear ego, I hear Freud, and I have a visceral reaction.
Literally nothing you're saying strikes a chord with me at all.
So some of it does strike a little bit of a chord with me, because it seems to me as though you're talking about meditative states, right? So you're saying that there's an infrastructure of acceptance built. Sorry, may I talk for just one moment? I'm so sorry. Thanks, Josh. So let me know if I'm understanding this correctly, though. So I'm going to try to paraphrase you. You're based on the initial call and what you initially said. It seems as though what you're saying is that religious practices very often have an infrastructure built around either inducing or facilitating meditative practice or meditative states, and that meditative states in and of themselves may have some benefit. And then you're possibly maybe making a conflation or affiliating those meditative states with some ambiguous version of what you would describe as spirituality. Does that sound fair?
I mean, I guess since spirituality is true. It's kind of a cringy word, right? And I would say, it's a word due to the lack of being able to describe such a phenomenon, because it's not something that is.
So is spirituality some form of subjective meditative experience that you've had in a religious context?
Yeah.
Either through meditation or group guided chanting, those sorts of things.
So what I've noticed is people who describe these experiences in meditative practice sound very similar to what I've experienced in an Islamic context, and my Muslim brothers at that point had experienced. And I just felt like, okay, there is some deeper truth there where you can get to, which is past logic.
Okay. Well, I got this for a second. So here's your deeper truth. So here's your deeper truth. Like, Josh, this is your deeper truth, because those experiences are the same experiences that a lot of monks have when they're chanting. They're the same sort of experiences that Buddhists have when they're meditating.
Sure.
These experiences that you're having are a form of mental state. So you're when you go into a meditative state, from a psychological and neurological perspective or neuroscience perspective, what you're doing is you're inducing an introspective state that's helping you sort of disconnect your internal perceptions from your external perceptions by focusing on your internal perceptions only. So when you focus on your internal perceptions only, and if you can train yourself well enough to focus on your internal perceptions only, so your perceptions of self or your thoughts about the universe or whatever, because of that, you can have these subjective experiences that are just kind of like whole cloth created in your mind and seem disconnected from reality, because you've taught yourself how to not have your sensory perceptions, which usually override those perceptions, be at the forefront. So from a psychological standpoint, that's something that anybody can do in a multitude of environments. However, when you couch it in a religious environment, you're priming yourself to have an experience that you're going to now read as a part of that religion from a mental standpoint. But you can do it in another context without that priming and have a similar form of meditative experience which is just in your head. This is just a thing that's happening in your brain without it being tethered to that. So it's not a necessity. You can have that, and this is something that Sam Harris does say. You can have that very easily if it's something that matters to you by joining some sort of meditative practice, by doing forms of meditation and having introspective experiences if that's something you value. Just know what they are.
You don't need to keep interrupting to say that you agree with someone.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry about that, but okay. No, but I agree with everything you say, and true, there is not a specific religion that is, necessary to induce these kind of experiences, right?
Okay, so we're agreement
and this
then.
is also yeah, we're in agreement. But I think I you just cut me off if the call's too long. You already were generous with your time, but what I'm just wondering is, these systems kind of provide people with this. It also, because I feel the Sam Harris way of giving the Sam Harris method to, providing this sort of
call Sam Harris.
Experience.
So it sounds to me
Don't
like
call
what
Sam
you're.
Harris. Hang on. No, I'm done. All right. Listen up.
Okay.
The fact that you experience something is not in anything that I would deny. The fact that people who meditate or pray or who follow some religious guideline have subjective experiences, I fully accept. I understand. But the fact that you've experienced something doesn't mean that you've found a deeper truth. There's no such thing as a deeper truth. Truth is truth, and truth is demonstrated, not just felt. This is the lie that is tied up in this notion of spirituality, that you've lost something if you're not spiritual. Bullshit. Prove it. That you've lost something by not being religion. Bullshit. Prove it. That you've discovered something in your subjective exploration of internal cognitive meditative process that is truer than what the rest of experience. Bullshit. Prove it.
I disagree. I disagree because I think this is not just something that
don't care if you disagree. Prove it.
You can prove it yourself, right? It's a very viable scientific experiment. You can do the method.
It's not.
And you can experience it, and many people have experienced
No,
it.
it's not. It's not a scientific experiment that results in a deeper truth. How the fuck do you prove a deeper truth? I'll bet you $1,000 right now
Yes.
that nobody has demonstrated the existence of a deeper truth, but there have been lots of people who claim it. What does it mean to say there's a deeper truth that we can scientifically demonstrate through your spirituality?
I agree. I think semantics is a big problem here, right? We get caught up in this term deeper truth, and perhaps I shouldn't have used this word. All I'm simply saying is there's this experience, and I had, and it's fine, right? My only question was whether you guys felt like you lost something, right? I was
one bit bored silly at the constant discussion of it, because when people do is they say, oh, I've experienced something and it's a deeper truth. No, it's not. Prove it. It's either true or it's not. I'll stop now because Shannon's got more and I don't.
So to answer your question, though, let me see if I can answer your question, Josh. So no, I don't feel like I lost anything because I can still have those experiences and I can still assign value to them. And if anything, they're richer now because I don't need something external to assign value to that experience for me. I know that it's something that's happening internally and something that I can induce myself and something that is valuable to me and me specifically. So, and I know now very clearly that I don't need to go external to somewhere where they're going to attempt to curate that experience for me, right? So if you go to someplace that's religious, like Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, like chanting monks, whatever, they are going to attempt to curate that experience for you, which means that it is less belonging to you. That's the way I perceive it. It is less belonging to me because now it is being curated through the lens of someone who's attempting to induce that experience so that they can tell me what it means, as opposed to me being able to facilitate and elicit that experience for myself, knowing full well what it is, so that I can assign the value to it myself. And now they are more valuable to me than they ever were before.
Sounds very sensible. I agree with you. Yeah, that's nice.
Okay. Cool. I think that's a good way to end this then, probably, because we're already over, and I like ending on agreement. So we'll end on agreement. How does that sound, Josh?
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking my call anyway, and yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the chat.
And on that note, welcome back.
Thanks.
I've missed the crap
Gone
out of
so
you.
long,
but
I moved.
I've missed you not just because of the shows, but I missed the times we get to talk a lot more lately. Yeah,
That'll happen more now.
I have zero interest in spirituality until somebody defines it. And I find it pretentious and prickish for people to come in to pretend or claim that they've discovered a deeper truth through meditation and that it's available to me if I just try. How the fuck do you know I didn't? What do you know about my life and what I have or haven't tried? It's just like the people who say, oh, well, if you put on the God helmet, you'll have this experience. Well, that doesn't work for everybody. We already know that's the case. So even amongst things that are tied to brain physiology, you can't claim that there's necessarily this universal thing. But if there's a truth needs to be demonstrated. And for all the people who called in, the theists who, for those theists that acknowledge that they didn't have argument or evidence, thank you for admitting that you have you don't have the truth. You don't even have a path to the truth. You don't even have the beginning of a hint of a path to the truth. And you didn't bother to ask God what you should call in and talk about. You didn't bother to ask God to prevent the sort of argument or evidence that you could present here so that you wouldn't look like you didn't have truth. And for the people who are like, oh, I've given up religion, but I feel like I'm missing something, I would say that the most plausible explanation for why one feels like they're missing something after giving up religion is because religion's very job is to make you feel like they're adding something to your life when they're not. Not anything true or real. The comfort that people feel of not being alone in the universe and not being loved in the universe is a lie. The notion of this fear of death and the possibility of an afterlife and the truth and being able to spend your afterlife with loved ones is, as far as we can tell, a lie. And when the religion goes away, those comforting thoughts go away, but they go away because they should go away, because they were false comfort, because they are not tied to the truth of reality. They're not a deeper truth. They're barely an inch deep. It's like you're just below the surface and you're seeing that double reflection that you get. If there's something that's true, we can demonstrate it. Now, is it true? And Shannon's going to be able to nod immediately that people have subjective experiences where they feel euphoric and they feel a sense of enlightenment and a sense of connection with the universe. Or do these things happen? Yes, they absolutely do. But that doesn't mean that it's true that you, in fact, do have some deeper connection to the universe. That's the thing where the pseudoscience and the woo drive us straight over a cliff from, hey, we've had an experience to let's ride this as far as we can go out into the great blue yonder, and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I also don't trust people like if there's a system that exists that is attempting to tell you what your personal experience means, the red flag, right? Right? If you're having a subjective, confusing personal experience and somebody outside of you has created a system that capitalizes on those experiences in order to tell you that that experience means what they believe in, question that.
Yep.
Doesn't mean you don't get to have that experience. It just means that it doesn't belong to them. It belongs to you, and don't let it.
Yeah. And what goes on in my head, well, it's not accessible to everybody unless I let them in, and even then you don't know if I'm telling you the truth. It doesn't mean it ever belongs to you. Thanks to Shannon for being here. Shannon will be back again next week. I'm going off to do an episode of the Sunday Show on the Line Network in a little bit, and so I can't hang around any longer. But we really appreciate everybody hanging out. We appreciate the fact that people have donated, that many of you have clicked like, and that you're still watching and all this other stuff. Shannon will be back next week, and that will be worth it. And you won't have to put up with me at all. So take care of yourself. Remember those health issues going on, and try to remember that it's okay to not know things as long as you're recognizing it with the goal of hopefully knowing through the most reliable means possible. See you next week.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's
It's time to get sexy, so watch Secular Sexuality Live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTSS and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callsex.